part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
Hello, welcome to Books with Brooks, the spooky episode. My friend Beth is here. Hi, Beth.
Hi, Brooks.
Hi, thanks for being here to talk about our spooky October read, which is called The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. I'm sure many people are familiar with this book. It's iconic. And for those of you who don't know, Books with Brooks is a monthly book club podcast hosted on the Press Play Podcast Network. We read one book a month, and then we come on here and we talk about it. So Beth is here this month. This book was her suggestion. She is a connoisseur of the macabre. Is that how you say that word?
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes I like to say the R just for fun, but I don't think that's correct.
Like macabre?
Macabre.
Amazing. Beth, tell us why did you suggest Haunting of Hill House for this month?
Okay, so I read Haunting of Hill House in high school, and I loved it. I thought it was so creepy. And I think it honestly sparked my interest in like haunted houses and just like that brand of horror. I like almost all kinds of horror and scary things, but I love a haunted house, and I think it's from this book.
That's so funny. So do you believe in ghosts?
I 100% believe in ghosts.
The way you were thinking about that, I really thought you were going to be like, I don't know. You're 100% in.
Yeah, because the older I get, the more I start to realize that like knowledge is not like a set thing. Like we don't have the answers to everything. And like when I think about aliens, like of course there are aliens. Like there have to be. Like,
Right.
Are we insane to think that we're the only like life organism on the planet? So like if there are aliens, like it's it's just another step to think of like dimensions and life and soul and what is alive and what isn't and what lingers. I don't know. I just think they're
so
out
deep.
there.
So deep. I feel like I did believe in ghosts, but I'm kind of the opposite. As I get older, the more skeptical I become.
That's so, and I think that's how a lot of people are. I think part of my philosophy is sort of selfish because I'm like, if I believe in them, then they're less likely to hurt me. Like that's what
Oh, one
happens in
of
my head.
those. Okay. So you're basically Dr. Montague's wife, and you're like,
Oh yeah.
I'm friendly with these ghosts. I'm trying to hang out with them so that they don't spook me.
Yeah. Yes.
Have you ever had this is not our line of questioning, but I feel like I want to know these things about you because you love spooky ghost stories. Have you ever had a ghost experience? Like a haunting experience?
No, but I will say that, growing up, we've had a couple doors slam in my house, my
Ooh.
childhood home, which was definitely spooky. Other than that, no, but I know some people have had close encounters and, I don't know. I believe them, because I love them and I trust them. So
I once went ghost hunting in my town's theater. It was where I grew up doing plays in my childhood. Anyway, these ghost hunters came with their ghost hunting equipment, and we turned off all the lights and went into the third balcony. It was so scared. It was the most scared I've ever been. But I don't really think I saw any ghosts, but it's very exciting.
I'm picturing you guys with a Dyson vacuum,
Yeah.
holding it out
Basically, that
everywhere.
was it. They had some kind of Geiger counter thing. That's not what it was, but I don't know. It was recording static, and then they had a metal detector kind of thing, and I think they were just taking pictures with a flash, because I guess that's how you catch them sometimes. So it was
Oh yeah.
someone was just randomly taking flash photography all around this dark theater. I remember that they registered I don't think they found anything in the third balcony where I went, but they went into the basement, which was really creepy. It was the prop basement where all the props are kept, which is terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
they got a reading on some really weird old baby carriage. So spooky.
Oh my God, I love that. I
Yeah.
live for it.
Yeah. So cool
I
to
would,
me.
like, love to take a recording on, like, a 78 and play it backwards and hear, like, Latin.
Yeah, hear messages for sure.
Yeah.
All right. That's really great background knowledge, Beth. Thank you so much for sharing. I know it's not super relevant to the book, but I do think it was relevant to our discussion of this spooky book. Do you want to give us a quick plot rundown of The Haunting of Hill House for those who maybe haven't read or it's been a while?
Absolutely. The Haunting of Hill House is basically the story of Dr. Montague, who is a sort of undefined doctor who would like to study the effects of a haunted house on a handful of individuals. So he invites some people out in the world of whom he has the knowledge that he's found out that they basically have had some sort of paranormal experience, these
Right.
people that he's inviting.
Hmm.
So he feels that there is like a door that is at least ajar to these people.
Yeah. Or maybe he wants to like rule out the skeptics, you know?
Absolutely. And I totally get it. So he invites several people, but only two show up, and then another who is related to the owners of the home, because that is like a condition upon which they can be there, is that they sort of have like one of their own is in the group. So we have Eleanor Nell, who is basically has just been sort of freed. That's sort of an insensitive word to say, but she basically she's been taking care of her mother for years, who was sick, and her mother has finally moved on, and so Eleanor
Became a
is now
ghost.
actually is like a person who can do things of her own free will. And so she goes to the house. This woman Theodora, she goes to the house. She is a we'll talk about this later, but she's a lesbian who
She's a suspected lesbian.
she's a suspected lesbian who who can hear kind of like what you're thinking if she touches you. So
Okay, here's the thing. I didn't
mhm.
get that at all from the book.
Oh,
Which we didn't talk about that in
okay.
book club. And I have since book club, not to derail us, since book club, I have started watching the Netflix Haunting of Hill House.
Mm-hmm.
And they do like she wears those gloves.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm like, okay, so that's gonna be like a thing in this show. But I didn't pick up on that in the book. And similarly, which we can talk about this more later, but like some people in the group did not pick up on the like gay undertones or because it's
Yeah.
not very explicit, understandably
There's a
so.
lot of subtle things that go on, and
Yeah.
I don't know that the book explicitly says that Theodora has to touch you to understand what you're thinking, but there's so many passages if you go back in where Nell says Theodora grabbed Nell's hand. Theodora put a
Mm,
finger on Nell's cheek. There
mm,
there are so many.
yeah.
And it's interesting because Eleanor sometimes appreciates the physical touch and sometimes hates it. So it's kind of
Yeah.
interesting that.
Okay, I did
And
notice that, but I think I just attributed it to the lesbian thing that I was sensing.
well, yes, which is also legit.
Part of it.
Um,
Part
and
of
then we
it.
have Luke, who is a member of the family who owns the home. And he's sort of like this like bad boy, bachelor
Yes.
guy, who kind of seems like he's just in it for the fun, for
Mhm.
the ride, I guess.
Mhm.
And the
Like he
pretty
doesn't have
ladies,
anything else
maybe.
going on, so he's like, "All right."
Yeah, like he strikes me as like someone who's like rich and doesn't really have to do anything. So like, whatever.
Yeah.
And so then the book kind of just goes from there. They're in the house and there's no real agenda except to sort of like experience the house. And let's just say things get a little freaky.
Things get a little freaky, as you can imagine. Great. So Shirley Jackson also, she was a prolific writer of her time. She died in 1965. This book came out in 1959, so actually like not that long before she passed away. Um, but Shirley Jackson has written a slew of books. This is her most famous, but she also wrote a short story called The Lottery that I think probably a lot of us
Hmm.
had as assigned reading in high school, which was sort of a like Hunger Gamesy Handmaid's Tale short story about a little town that holds a lottery every year, and you think they're going to win something, and then it turns out, spoiler alert, someone gets stoned to death. So Shirley Jackson's got some like weird stuff happening up top, and I'm here for it.
Yeah.
And she was very progressive for her time. She was like the breadwinner of their family, went to college, all that stuff. So I just bring that up because I think she is a remarkable author. And I'm so glad I got to read more of her work.
Me too.
Beth, I know the answer to this, but did you like the book?
I loved it. And I will have to say for our audience members that I, in fact, was the only one who liked it.
No, I don't think that's true.
I was the only thumbs up.
Okay. Well, yeah, I did give it a thumbs down. However, I feel like I need to really couch that by saying like I'm so glad that I read this. I really think that over time my perspective on it is going to change and I'm going to like it a lot more in the rear view than I liked it as I was actively reading it. I think I struggled with a lot of the language as we've discussed like so many of the relationships and even the action happens like in subtext.
Yes.
Which I found just really confusing. I had trouble following it at a lot of points. I was constantly sort of feeling like, did I miss something?
It's incredibly confusing. And I think that part of me being the only person who liked it is attributed to the fact that I've read it twice before and I've seen both of the movies and the Netflix series several times.
Yeah.
So I understand these characters and I know what's going on. And I think reading it like this time, I hadn't read it in several years. Reading it this time, I was like, man, if I didn't know this, I would be royally confused.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that was the case for myself and a lot of people in book club. I also felt really strongly that there isn't that much action in this book. Like really there's
Correct.
only like maybe 4 sort of like scary action scenes. The rest of it is just kind of these characters like hanging out in a library talking to each other.
Yeah, I liked Brooks. Like when you first like told book club like that we were going to read it, I feel like really accurately described the book as you had been sort of like summarized by something else. I don't know if it was Goodreads or something, but it's just a very like tonal book. It's a very
Yes.
mood book.
Mm-hmm.
It's not action heavy. It's definitely more atmosphere.
Yeah, big time. Yeah, heavy on the atmosphere. I mean, I did love the descriptions of the house, which is obviously its own character in this book. The house kind of comes to life. It sort of starts to like affect each of our characters. And I love the description of like the house was built like off center. Like none of the doors are centered. Like none of the walls are at right angles. Like it's just this house where you go in and you feel like a fun house, like where you're just like you can't get your footing. You just feel a little bit off balance all the time, and I love that. Like that's a really fun idea. And like go stay in that house, you'll go crazy.
One of my favorite like quotes is like Hill House not being sane or not sane,
Not
whatever.
sane.
It's just so freaky because it personalizes the house.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes. Well, and that's so cool. And I think, I don't know, but this must be my like urban dwelling personality at this point, but like I don't feel a lot of connections to like buildings at this point. Like I don't know. So it was really fun to remember that, like what that's like, cuz I do think at least growing up, like I did feel really connected to like the house I grew up in, and like it has its own personality and you think of it in a certain way, and there are some parts of it that are spooky or whatever. And I don't really feel that way now. Like I just live in an apartment building. I don't feel one way or another about it. But
Yeah, I
it's
agree.
cool to remember that like there are these old houses that have their own personalities that like
Yes.
generations of families or people have like lived in. Well, and we talked about this at book club too, of just like how much people used to like really live. They would be born in their house and they would die in their house. and then their kids
Mm-hmm.
would be born in their house and die in the house, and like there was just this like different way of living, I guess. I don't know, but it was
Absolutely.
just
You'd get
yeah,
married in the backyard and
right.
yeah,
You
have
hit
the
every
children. It's yeah.
milestone like in that house, and you feel really connected to it and like very planted in a way that maybe we don't anymore. At least millennials don't. We can move all the time, we don't own anything, and
And that was the goal for Hill House for Hugh Crane, who built it for his wife, who passed away like mere feet in front of the
that's
house.
right. She died like coming
So,
up the driveway.
yeah. But it's so creepy to think of all the dreams and the goals that you would have had to build such a thing
Yeah.
and have them be kind of like shattered like right
Mhm.
away.
Such a like lasting legacy that's like never going to be enjoyed. Yeah, and that guy
Yeah.
seems crazy, that Hugh
Oh, yeah.
Crane. So Beth, do you think this book is scary?
So I love buying into being scared. And I think that it's a mindset. Like I truly think that we can absolutely scare people who don't want to be scared or who are resistant to being scared. But this book, like reading it with its flowery language and it being very descriptive and somewhat wordy, I was like, I'm doing this. I'm buying into this. Like I'm sitting on the couch. It's cold and rainy and windy outside. Like I'm putting myself in the shoes of this person, right? So like for me, it was scary. I think I could have read the book in exactly the same circumstances and not allowed myself to be scared.
Hmm.
So yes, I do think it's scary. I think it's all about your mindset.
Yeah, that's fair.
What did you think, Brooks?
I didn't think it was scary.
Mm-hmm.
I think it goes back to all the things I've already said, which is that I mostly felt too confused, I think, to be scared. Like I wasn't
Sure.
confident at any point that like I was supposed to be scared. I don't know if that makes sense.
Sure.
Um like I'm thinking back on The Shining, which I think similarly for me, like I really never read any Stephen King. I don't read a lot of like horror. I definitely don't watch it. I don't watch scary movies, although I feel like I have been dabbling in them mostly as a result of book club. So that's great, really pushing my own
Hey.
boundaries. But I remember being scared during The Shining. There are suspenseful moments, and like I don't think I had that in Hill House,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately. Um Although again, like in retrospect, I do like thinking about the like whose hand was I holding, and the
Oh
like
yeah.
blood on the walls and the thumping on the walls, and like I mean that stuff is scary. I don't know, I think I just was too confused about even sometimes just like who was talking or who's in the room wasn't even clear to me, and so I caught myself up
Well,
in that.
so much of it feels like a fever dream.
Yes, it's frenetic and confusing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's
Yes.
and I think part of it is meant to be like when she's like kind of this is towards the end of the book, but she's like kind of they're running through the fields or they're sort of outside exploring and Eleanor's just ahead of Luke and Theo and she keeps thinking that they're talking about her and she keeps looking back over her shoulder and she's like, "Are you talking about me?" And they're like, "No." And they're running through the fields and then all of a sudden she realizes she's
Mhm.
alone and that they've left her. And to me, like that's its own brand of scary too, is not understanding reality, is not knowing as a reader if I'm reading reality. Like it's upsetting more than scary, but I think that that goes into the whole mood of it.
Yeah.
It's like my stomach was kind of like, is this real? Is she dreaming? Like and her being alone, it's so sad.
Yeah.
Her feelings of loneliness and depression and all that.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I agree. I see what you're saying. I do think like unsettling maybe is a better
Yes.
term than I was more unsettled than I was like scared.
Hey everyone, it's JD from the Hyman Podcast. Backed by popular demand, I'm excited to let you know that new episodes of the Hyman Podcast will drop every other Monday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. We're going to continue the conversations we started last season and keep having those hard conversations. There is so much in store for you this season, and I'm excited to share it with you. Subscribe today so you don't miss a single moment. The Hyman Podcast, part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
Let's talk about the first sentence. This one's a fun one. No live organism can continue for long to exist sanely under conditions of absolute reality. Even larks and katydids are supposed by some to dream. Then it goes on to say, Hill House, not sane, stood by itself against its hills, holding darkness within. It had stood so for 80 years and might stand for 80 more. What do you think about those?
I love the second sentence. I love the second sentence so much, and I'm glad you read it because I think it's just like phenomenal. The first sentence is like,
Yeah,
oof.
I kind of think you have to take them together. Yeah. The first sentence is a lot.
The first sentence is like, wait a second. Like, this isn't my science textbook. Like, I need to find my book.
Yeah. Also, I noticed in the Netflix episode that they changed it to 100 years, and I was like, it's 80.
Oh, look at you.
Yeah, I noticed that change.
I did think about the first sentence, like, and part of that is because I know how much we talk about the first sentence in book club. So like I was actually paying attention, but
Yeah.
I was like, man, that is kind of like really freaky to think about plants dreaming.
Yeah, that's true.
Or like other organisms, whatever.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's funny because like my cat dreams for sure. He has nightmares and he starts to like twitch and I wake him up. Like I don't know. Maybe they're not nightmares. Maybe they're good dreams where he's chasing a mouse. I don't know. But he gets twitchy and he's deep in sleep and I can tell he's dreaming.
I love it.
It is weird to think about that. Like they have a subconscious as well that's like activated while they're asleep. Like, ah!
Yeah.
Yeah, that is weird to think about. Yeah, Hill House, not sane, stood by itself against its hills, holding darkness within.
I really love
It's
that.
beautiful. I mean, the language, she's a beautiful writer for sure. And I don't mean to imply that this book isn't well written because it is. And especially like for its time, I'm sure it was extremely well written. And like there are some really beautiful sentences that are beautiful, but you know, it's just language is different today. We use much shorter sentences. We're much more explicit in our language. Like it's just a different experience reading a book from 1959.
Yeah. And I mean, like, I think Nick pointed out at book club, like, you know, we don't really get any action until like 115 pages in or something like that. And, you know, in today's society, like we just don't, we're looking, you know, we're like scrolling through Netflix, looking at previews, being like, okay, this cool thing that's happening in the preview, like that better happen like in the first 10 minutes of the show. Like,
right.
You know,
our attention spans are so short.
Very short. But it's different, right? Like we want to go into different depths, right? So like, I don't know. I don't think it's bad. Just different.
It reminded me of like, you know, old musicals and even movies used to have the overture in the beginning, which was just like where the orchestra played for 10 minutes.
I love it.
I know, but I also hate it because I'm like, let's get to it. Like, let's get to it. And I did feel like this book had this like long overture of like getting you into the story before the action begins. So nothing really happens to like 150 pages in. Yeah. Which is just not how we tell stories today. So our character Eleanor, says she has this mantra that she repeats. Journeys end in lovers meeting. She says it all the time. She says it to the other characters because eventually they're saying it back to her. And then everyone's saying this, journeys end in lovers meeting. What do you interpret that to mean, Beth?
So I will fully admit that I don't know. Like I think that Eleanor is a very aimless, wandering, lonely person who I think has no concept herself of what she's going towards or what she needs or wants. And so I don't know. I mean, I think a very like easy way to interpret it would be that she's not looking for love in necessarily a romantic way, but that she's looking to find the kind of peace or acceptance that love brings. And then she'll know that she's where she's supposed to be. And I do think that
Yeah.
there's part of
Lovely.
that in the book for sure, right? Because she like
Yeah.
basically finally becomes satiated and satisfied with her being a part of a group and a part of a thing, which is the house. But other than that, I really like often was very confused by what she meant by that.
Yeah. Well, I feel like I should have done more research on it because it's apparently a Shakespearean quote
Mm-hmm.
that perhaps was more popular in 1959 than it is today. Today, it's not popular at all. And maybe there's a meaning from its use in a play that I'm unfamiliar with. But yeah, she says that a lot, Journey's End and Lover's Meeting. I mean, I took it to be sort of like, yeah, a lot of what you said, but also like this hope, like a reason for her to do something, and then the hope that it would turn out well.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to go on this journey and it's going to be hard, but in the end, I will be happy that I did it.
Yes.
Like that idea. Because all of our characters really hem and haw. Well, I guess the only two we get really are Theodora and Eleanor, but they hem and haw about going to Hill House. And then in the end, kind of just decide to do it. Theodora, because she gets in a fight with her roommate / lover, and Eleanor, because she's just like kind of can't deal with her sister anymore.
Right.
And they both seem to sort of surprise themselves by going, and then they're kind of like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing here. But then are surprised by how much they feel like they belong at Hill House in this group of people. And like, they're very happy in the beginning to be there. Which we talked about this too, but it seems like all the characters, like they experience so many emotions in every scene. Like, people are ecstatically happy, they're in love with each other, they hate each other, they're scared, they're worried and confused. Like, they are bouncing around through every emotion pretty much constantly, and it gives you whiplash and is confusing,
very,
but definitely adds to the energy of the book, which is unsettling.
And part of it is the pace of the book and the pace of the characters. It's never consistent,
right?
Which is also unsettling. It's nauseating because you're like,
Yeah.
wow, I'll go through like 3 chapters that are nobody says anything. And then I'll have this dialogue that is spitfire that I don't understand, but is also kind of fun and sort of like riddles.
Yeah.
And then something scary happens in the house. And then we're back to like talk about being in the field for 20 pages. It's really wild.
It is wild. And you have no concept of how much time has gone by.
Right.
Really at all. And then it's fun where in like one of the last scenes, one of our characters, Nell, actually asks, how long have we been here? Because she doesn't know either. And so she Shirley Jackson, like, hats off to like the way she handled the passage of time. It's fascinating and very cool because you really don't know. And then we find out they've only been there for a week and it feels like months.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know?
Oh, yeah.
Like, they've lived a whole life in Hill House. They've only been there for a week. It's a cool reveal.
It is cool.
In the end. I don't know. I guess we can spoil the ending because if people have gotten this far on the podcast, they've probably read the book. Yeah. So in the end, Eleonora really, like, she kind of, well, I interpreted it
I
as,
love
like,
that you just said Eleonora, which is a combination of both of the female characters.
I did. Thank you.
Which Eleanor, I kind of love.
And Theodora. 2 words also that I absolutely cannot spell despite having spent an entire book reading their names.
There's too many vowels for sure.
And they go in a weird order. Okay, so Nell I interpreted it as like she kind of gets possessed by the house and she sort of becomes the house. And she goes on this really weird, wild, runabout where she knocks on doors and she's yelling and she's like going in and out of windows and like she's basically spooking everyone in the house while they look for her.
Yeah.
And then she climbs up the staircase and it's kind of unclear what she's doing, but it's, I think, implied that she's going to kill herself, that she's going to hang herself from the staircase, which is what legend holds happened to like the original owners of the house.
Yeah. Yeah, I think she's like fulfilling the role that she thinks the house has like given her.
Right. So they all rescue her. They like come to her rescue. They're like, no, like calm down. They get her down. Like nothing bad happens. But then the next day they're like, you gotta go. Yeah. Like this isn't going well. This is affecting you poorly. The doctor feels like really strongly that she needs to leave. She needs to leave on her own with none of them because they sort of debate like, should someone go with her? And they're like, no. She needs to go by herself because she needs to get away from like all the influences of the house. She needs to completely forget about the house.
Yes.
And once she leaves and once she's alone again, like all of this will recede and she'll go back to normal. So that's what the doctor thinks will happen. And she's like, okay, bye. Well, first she's like, how long have we been here? And they're like, it's only been a week. And she's like, bye. And then she's driving away and she's looking at them all in the rearview mirror. And what happens?
She accelerates the car towards a tree. And at the very last second, she asks herself, why am I doing this? And then she kills herself by crashing into the tree.
She drives into a tree.
And it's insane to me. It's like very scary. The last moment of realization that she has. That's so scary to me.
Also, I interpreted it to be the same tree that Hugh Crane's wife died crashing into.
Yes, for sure.
Do you think? Okay, yeah.
It has to be.
In the unending crashing second before the car hurled into the tree, she thought clearly, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? Why don't they stop me? And that's basically the end of the book.
Oh, God. It's like heartbreaking. It's like so sad.
It is sad.
That just gave me chills.
Yeah. It's very sad. She's a very sad character. I feel like we need to do a character study on her.
Yes.
That's the thing with this book is I think I'm so glad we read it in book club. I'm so glad we've had the chance to discuss it a couple of times because I think it's the perfect book for book club because there's so much in here. And this is probably why this novel has such staying power and such like cultural relevancy because there's so much to talk about. There's so much in here that isn't explicit, that is up to interpretation. Like that's what makes it art, right? It's art.
Yeah. And you can see yourself in different characters in a way that allows you to like to be drawn into the story. Like I can see myself in the idea of like I need to be part of a group. I don't feel, and feeling this overwhelming warmth that I've been accepted by a group no matter what the conditions are, Yeah. It's very scary.
It is scary. Okay. The book's scary, I guess. Well, Beth, we could talk about this all day. This book was such a good read. I know nobody liked it, but I think everyone felt really glad that they read it. And now I'm trying to watch the Netflix show, so I think we should come back on and do a follow-up and talk about the Netflix show.
I would love
once I'm brave enough to finish it all. So let's do that. We'll do a follow-up. And in the meantime, happy reading, everyone. And Beth, thank you so much for coming on.
You're welcome. It was my pleasure.
Books with Brooks is produced by Mo Barrow with theme music by Jonathan Allen. Books with Brooks is part of the Press Play Podcast Network, which empowers hosts to create high-quality professional shows that inspire and entertain. If you've been dreaming of hosting your own podcast, we can help. Please email content@pressplaypodcasts.com to get started today. Please be sure to subscribe to get the latest episodes wherever you listen to podcasts.